Crack a can, pour a bottle, top off at the tap, or grab a growler.
Cheers, guys.
Mainers love beer.
This sour Southwester is awesome. Are you typically a craft beer aficionado?
Oh, too much, I think.
And business is booming.
We're making some of the best beer in the country.
There's just so many options, so many different breweries.
One after another, breweries are popping up everywhere. For the first time, they're in all 16 counties.
Beer is diverse. And in Maine, I've learned that there's no limitation to that diversity.
But the craft beer craze didn't always exist. In fact, Maine is the birthplace of Prohibition.
It's amazing to see so many establishments that make and sell alcohol in the birthplace of temperance laws.
How the Dry Days influenced some of the toughest liquor laws in the nation. The one bill a century later that led to this brewery explosion.
It changed everything.
And will we hit a point of too many?
The sky's the limit for the Maine beer industry.
Now a special presentation, Maine on Tap, sponsored by Porthole Restaurant.
It's no secret, Mainers love beer. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jana Barnello. People pack tasting rooms like Rising Tide here in Portland almost every day of the week, nearly every day of the year. From IPAs, sessions, sours, and stouts to wild concoctions created with coffee, chocolate, and more. It's hard to find a bad brew, and there's a reason for that. The industry here is well crafted. It's bringing a lot of business to the state's biggest cities and tiniest towns. As of April 2018, there are 117 active breweries in Vacation Land. A recent report found the breweries added $228 million to the state's economy in 2016. And the Maine Brewers Guild says the industry employs 1,600 to 1,800 people. Those numbers are only expected to rise as Mainers' love for what's on tap continues. But the love wasn't always there. And to explain how we got here, we have to look to the past, specifically the mid-1800s. Known as the Maine Law, Maine was the first state to pass prohibition, which forbid the sale and manufacture of alcohol for pleasure. And as Greg Lagerquist shows us, 163 years ago this weekend, it led to violence and death in Portland, known as the Rum Riot.
That's the one-year-old stuff, right?
Yeah. At Portland's Liquid Riot, homage is paid to the past.
So Liquid Riot is a nod to the Portland Rum Riots, 1855.
They've named a rum for that violent June weekend 163 years ago, and another, a dark one, for the events that followed.
Neil Dow had put into place the Maine Law, which was the first form of prohibition, and local townspeople didn't like it.
Neil Dow was Portland's mayor in 1851 and again in 1855. He's remembered as the father of prohibition, championing total abstinence from intoxicating drinks and what's still known as the Maine Law.
Yes, it's the first instance of liquor prohibition in the United States, and sort of the precursor to what we see in federal prohibition during the 1920s.
The law was statewide, but Dow made sure it was rigidly enforced in Portland, a prosperous, boisterous waterfront city where it was a major and, for many, unwelcome change.
To put into perspective, there were almost 200 drinking establishments on the peninsula alone in 1850.
Many of those establishments were forced to close. Others converted to making alcohol for the few permitted purposes, like medicine. Illegal liquor was often confiscated and kept in what was known as the Rum Room in the basement of City Hall. On Saturday, June 2nd, 1855, tensions boiled over.
There was a rumor that Neil Dow and other members of the city government were going to disperse that liquor. So a mob started to form, or a crowd of people started to form, and they were marching on City Hall. The militia was called in, and they fired on the crowd, and killing one individual.
And witnesses say Dow himself ordered the militia to open fire.
Neil Dow, once the Rum Riot happened, he was not reelected. So, you know, him trying to fight rum and trying to fight through prohibition was kind of the demise of his political campaign.
And so today, visitors can raise a glass in memory of Dow's demise and stand in defense of a good drink.
That's what it is, just kind of a nod to our forefathers and the people who fought to have what they wanted, and ideally have it in moderation. But yeah, we're doing it right here on the waterfront, just steps from the town hall and steps from where the Portland Rum Riot happened.
As you heard, even in Neil Dow's heyday, Prohibition hardly stopped people from drinking. They just found new ways to do it.
Mainers have history with homemade hooch.
In the early 1800s, Maine was considered the drunkest place in the country. And there were some European writers that wrote that the United States was the drunkest country in the world, so theoretically Maine was the drunkest place in the world.
And according to Maine beer author Josh Christie, Mainers who loved their liquor got creative during Prohibition. The initial Maine law banned the sale and manufacture of alcohol, but a more relaxed law replaced it in 1858, which only banned selling it.
There would be bars down in what we now call the Old Port that would be selling, oyster crackers for about the cost of what a pint of beer would cost. And then you would buy the crackers and they throw in the beer for free.
In other places, alcohol would be smuggled in from out of state.
There's some kind of geographic advantages to Maine. We have this incredibly long coast, if you count all the inlets and islands and peninsulas and stuff like that. So a lot of places for people to bring liquor in from other states or from Canada.
Some sold alcohol for medicinal purposes. Many farmers fermented apples and rhubarb for hard cider and wine.
People were making alcohol out of things that they had left over.
1820 Wines in Portland is picking up where those farmers left off and making modern-day rhubarb wine.
This is what people have been doing, so why not do it again? Maybe do it a little bit better and get it out in people's hands.
Getting your hands on wine, spirits, or beer was tough during Prohibition, but overall, to get some, Christie says it just took a little bit of Yankee ingenuity.
And it just added a couple hurdles that people had to get around.
Today, while people have the right to homebrew, most prefer to wet their whistle at the exploding number of craft breweries that are popping up all over Maine. But you may not realize none of this could have been possible without another change to Maine law only a few years ago. Here once again is Greg Lagerquist to explain.
If you want to crack a Maine-made beer, you have a lot of choices these days.
They can go in an old barn to see a brewery, they can be on a wharf and see a brewery, they can be in a mountain chalet to see a brewery, and everything in between.
It's a far cry from where we were in 1986, when Maine's first craft beer maker, Geary's, opened its doors and showed CBS 13 around.
Why do I have to brew beer? Yeah. What more noble profession is there?
In fact, we were there for the very first pint of Geary's sold at $3 Dewey's on the Portland waterfront that December.
It's got a good taste to it. Definitely a good beer. I'm impressed with it.
But impressive or not, Maine's beer scene grew very slowly in the years that followed, with places like Gritty's, Shipyard, Sea Dog, Allagash, and others opening at a rate of maybe one new brewery every other year. So how do you explain what's happening today, when it seems a new brewery is opening almost every other week in Maine? The real change happened 6 years ago, in April 2012.
If you were to look at a growth curve, you'd see it just shoot right up.
It was a change in Maine law called LD 1889. Before that law, breweries could not sell samples or have modern tasting rooms, only give small samples away. The new law allowed breweries to make beer, sell beer in cans, bottles, and growlers to go, and sell samples all on site.
Before it would have been, like, okay, we had an industrial store and here's your tiny little sample, and it's just changed everything. And that culture, just as soon as that law came by to allow for charging of samples and allowing for them to pour bigger samples than, just a free little teeny one, it meant that it was economically viable for them to have a place that people could come.
And once the change happened, Maine's beer map exploded from a relative handful to more than 100 breweries and growing in just a matter of a few short years.
As these breweries succeed and grow, they're taking that money, they're putting it right back into their business, they're hiring more people, they're expanding their facilities, and it's all about accommodating this growing interest in craft beer. And what we're seeing now, where we're thinking the industry is heading, is a lot of small producers operating on a small scale, serving a hyper-local market. And that really fits in what consumers want. They walk into a bar, they go, what's local?
When you talk to people who brew beer, they say it's just as much an art as it is a science. Here at Allagash, they use all sorts of ingredients to flavor their beers, like oats and spices. But any great beer has 4 main ingredients, which Allagash has laid out for us here: malts, hops, yeast, and water. Brewers can use these ingredients in all sorts of combinations to make their beer just as they want it. But it turns out water may just be the most important ingredient. Looking at this map, you'll notice many breweries are here in Portland or the communities surrounding it. The reason why is about 20 miles away. Sebago Lake is just northwest of Portland. It's more than 300 feet deep and has a glacial sand bottom that acts as a natural filter. The lake's pristine water is widely viewed as some of the finest brewing water in the world. Now the brewers outside of Portland are just as happy with their water quality. In Newcastle, there's Oxbow Brewery. It's named for a bend in the Sheepscot River. According to the state, the water comes from an aquifer that's right beneath the brewery. The aquifer also waters Oxbow's orchard, where the brewery is growing fruit for many of its untraditional Belgian-style farmhouse ales. And about an hour from the Mid-Coast is Lewiston's Baxter Brewing. The main office of tourism says the water source there is Lake Auburn. But the state says the brewery's founder is more proud of the water not used. It normally takes 7 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of beer. At Baxter, it only takes 4, thanks to the brewery's green practices. Up next on Maine on Tap, from York County to the tip top of Maine, you can find a brewery nearly anywhere.
43 breweries about 5 years ago to about 120 today in Maine, and now one in all 16 counties.
Many are in Portland. Some are setting up shop in the woods.
There's nothing like a beer road trip.
But will there soon be too many? Plus, creative concoctions.
Wicked smooth, not too hoppy, juicy.
The collaborations for one-of-a-kind products.
Love how it came out. Couldn't be more proud of it.
The buzz and high demand.
Collabs are hot right now.
Yeah, you want to get your hands on it and drink it as fast as you can.
Did you know there are special rules in Maine for St. Patrick's Day? The holiday is a busy one for bars, and owners of Irish pubs in Maine pushed for change so they could serve up beers earlier. You can't sell alcohol before 9 a.m. on Sundays. When St. Paddy's Day fell on a Sunday in 2013, Governor Paul LePage signed an exception into law. In case you were wondering, the next time March 17th falls on a Sunday will be next year in 2019.
Maine on Tap, sponsored by the Porthole Restaurant.
Did you know most breweries in Maine sell their beer in cans? In fact, there are very few that are bottles only. That includes Maine Beer Company in Freeport and up until a few weeks ago, Allagash in Portland. The Portland Brewery released its first 4 packs of canned hoppy table beer.
Here on Industrial Way in Portland, it is hallowed beer ground. Maine Beer Company, Rising Tide, and Bissell Brothers all got their start in this building. Right now, it's home to Foundation Brewing. And just on the other side is Austin Street and Battery Steel. Beer neighborhoods have been popping up all over Portland and beyond. So we set out to see how many breweries Maine can sustain and whether there's room to brew for all.
It's a tight squeeze in the tasting room at Lone Pine Brewing in Portland, the result of 2 years of hard work.
It is intimidating when you're coming in as a new guy.
Co-owner Tom Madden credits their success in part to quality.
If you are amongst others who are making high quality beer, you yourself should be making very high quality beer in order to fit in.
They've fit in a crowded neighborhood of adult beverage makers. Lone Pine is next door to a winery, around the corner from Good Fire Brewing, and blocks from Oxbow and Urban Farm Fermentory.
It is sort of one of those situations where a rising tide lifts all ships.
It just so happens Rising Tide is Lone Pine's biggest brewing neighbor. And so far, there seems to be room for them all.
The odds are if you threw a dart at a wall and went to a brewery, the beer there is going to be good, which is not the case in other states.
Beer writer Carla Lauder says there's no cap to the number of breweries that can find success, as long as the quality keeps up and they have a balanced business plan. She says it's especially true if they're willing to open past Portland.
We're kind of going back to what was happening before Prohibition, which is where the town had its own brewery and it was kind of self-supporting. So it's about its own community.
To that point, we headed out of town and into the woods.
We're not quite city folk, so it feels more comfortable out here.
Nice Brewing Company co-founders Tim Bissell and Dustin Johnson opened their brewery 5 years ago in Limerick. They built on family land, saving on rent, focusing on making good beer, and welcoming more breweries like them to the state.
There are not too many breweries in Maine. And to a larger point, there just aren't too many breweries in America. We still don't have as many breweries as we have wineries. So I think we have a lot of catching up to do.
Many others are joining NICE in smaller areas of Maine. Just this year, 9 breweries have opened in places like Waldoboro, Waterville, and Fort Kent. 9 more are set to open by the end of the summer in places like Berwick, Bethel, and Booth Bay Harbor. The existing brewers say, bring on more beer.
If we're all, really honest with ourselves as who we are and what we can do with demand, then there's no reason that there can't be many more of us to come.
The quality of craft beer brings tourists from all over to Maine for a taste. Many people hitch a ride on the brew bus to maximize their sipping experience. Dan Lamparello shows us the new ways you can sample Maine beer here at home and around the world.
Almost daily, Maine's tap rooms pair people with the perfect pint.
So many options, so many different breweries, so many people trying to offer their beer, their passion, their art.
Thank you.
Good. Take care. Thank you.
And it's more accessible than ever through taproom tourism.
Maine has a lot of infrastructure for tourists, but people are coming here for beer.
Trading in lobsters for lagers as Maine's next big thing.
We've become a state where craft beers and wines have become very, very important. We have trails now that people will come to Maine and follow the trails of the craft brewers and the winemakers.
The Maine Brew Bus saw an opening 6 years ago.
We started with a simple idea that people wanted to be connected to these breweries. We had one bus, one tour.
This summer, they'll have more than 30 tours a week, shuttling tourists from brewery to brewery. And so far, it's served people from 38 different states and 4 countries.
The visitor to Portland is here for more than just lighthouses and lobsters. They're also here for lagers and ales.
Maine's first beer box debuted last year.
40-foot shipping container, 78 draft lines on the side.
And even that's expanding to bring Maine beer to the masses.
We're shipping it over to the United Kingdom. We're going to be featured at one of their biggest beer festivals over there.
But that beer is also having a big impact here at home.
Nowadays, the microbrewery movement almost seems to be expected when you go to a town.
All right, you're all set.
It's bringing business to communities that may need that extra shot in the arm.
Maybe the mill has shut down a couple towns over. One restaurant is hanging on, but then a brewery shows up. They start, selling beer a few hours a day, then they open up 7 days a week, and then the lunch place starts doing well, and then the coffee shop opens up.
$2.70.
And giving not only tourists, but locals a place to enjoy a pint, too.
Becomes a point of pride for the community, too.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
With so many beers to choose from, brewers like Mass Landing in Westbrook are turning to limited releases to attract attention and create buzz. They're known as beer collaborations, where 2 breweries team up to make something one of a kind. And as Jennifer Long explains, the brewers say it's not just good for business, it's also a lot of fun.
It's mid-May, and late morning, a line starts forming outside of Westbrook's Mass Landing Brewery. Inside, Beastie Boys is blaring, and people are getting their hands on something they can't get anywhere else.
Super delicious, hoppy, citrusy, tropical. It's what everyone wants right now.
Wicked smooth, not too hoppy, juicy. Definitely taste some grapefruit up front.
It's 3 the Hard Way, a double IPA brewed with Galaxy, Topaz, Citra, and Vic's Secret hops, a collaboration between Mass Landing and Orono Brewing Company.
It's just a delicious beer. I love how it came out. Couldn't be more proud of it, honestly.
It's the first time these 2 breweries have come together, a collaboration born out of a need.
This all started because we're getting a new canning line, and these guys have the exact same canning line that we're getting. So I was like, can we come down and use that and get a little bit of experience there?
And a want.
Collaboration beers are a lot of fun. It kind of breaks us out of the normal day-to-day brewing process.
It's really just an excuse to hang out with industry friends.
The result, a one-of-a-kind beer made just one time.
Yeah, it's only gonna happen once, so enjoy it while it does.
Creating a buzz all its own.
I have people that will text me and say, if you're going to do this, can you bring me some? I'll trade you, I'll pay you extra for it. People want to get one, even if it's just one can. It's crazy.
Because when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, you want to get your hands on it and drink it as fast as you can.
Next, beakers and beer. This is a science lab only for brews.
Then there was no turning back. Now I'm a yeast biologist.
The unique testing to make sure what you're drinking is the best it can be.
Brewers in the Portland area are just so lucky, brewers in Maine, to have this resource.
Plus, it's 2018, but these spots in Portland take you back in time.
You even pass it on the street and may not even know that it's here.
The nods to the past nestled in the city, and the cocktails you can cheers to. Believe it or not, there are still a number of dry towns in Maine where the sale of alcohol is prohibited. Take a guess at how many are left. 72, 54, 25, or 13. The answer after the break.
Maine on Tap, sponsored by the Porthole Restaurant.
There are still a number of dry towns in Maine where the sale of alcohol is prohibited. According to the state, there are currently 54 dry communities in Maine. The latest to make a change was the town of Penobscot in March of this year.
Since Prohibition, Maine has been playing catch-up with its liquor laws. Now, bars in Portland are using the state's unique history to create a current-day cocktail scene with nods to the past. And as Jennifer Long shows us, drink menus are overflowing with Prohibition classics and hidden pubs that will take you back in time.
You can even pass it on the street and may not even know that it's here.
Hidden in plain sight, Bramhall Pub in Portland's West End takes you underground. Owner Mark Hibbard calls it a modern speakeasy.
It has this escape value where you can't really see what's going on in the outside world. It's really nice. It kind of gives you that element of a different time.
The brick, stained glass, and candle votive create an intimate scene, and the drink menu stays on theme.
We've got about 165 different bottles of whiskey on the shelf right now.
Hibbard says their craft cocktail list is extensive, with Prohibition classics as mainstays.
Probably the most popular of maybe the Prohibition era cocktails that we do is a drink called a scofflaw. There's a reason why these drinks have been around so long. It's because they're good and they work.
Much brighter and easier to spot, one of Portland's newest cocktail bars is also whipping up old classics.
Portland has a rich tradition of cocktails.
Owner Joshua Miranda says Blythe & Burroughs specializes in the unique.
But we have one drink. It's called the Penny Cap, and it's porcini mushroom infused bourbon with an Amaro blend we do, some sherry and Maine maple, and we serve it smoked in a bottle.
Today we'll be doing the Jack Rose cocktail, which is a Prohibition-era classic.
Bartender and general manager Matthew Sherwood showed us the depth of the drink menu.
So we're going to use 1 ounce of 8 Bells rum from New England Distilling, 1 ounce apple brandy, Applejack, and 3/4 ounce of the rhubarb grenadine, and then 3/4 ounce fresh lime juice.
A classic with a bit of a twist. And if that wasn't sweet enough, another surprise, a hidden passage to a second bar and speakeasy. And speaking of speakeasy,
people find us.
Lincoln's is not to be outdone. Portland's only hidden bar has no signage, no marketing, no address or phone number.
We just keep it very simple, really back to basic, gin and tonic, vodka soda, Jack and Coke. We save the craft cocktails for the other places. We make drinks, not cocktails here.
Owner Angie Drinkwater says the idea was to create something unique and cheap.
Everything we sell is $5, cash only. Everything, whether it's a drink, a beer, a t-shirt, a hat, we have one food item, $5.
Back to basics and reminiscent of a simpler time.
Give people a little bit of a blast into history, I guess.
And giving cocktail lovers another scene to drink in, if they can find it.
From mixed drinks back to beer. When we talk about what makes a good drink, many people say flavor. The quality of a beer can leave a bad taste in your mouth or have you reaching for another. Dan Lamparello shows us the science being used to keep your favorite beers consistent.
With every batch of beer, there's a certain expectation.
Yeah, yep.
From the color to the taste.
That quality
was becoming more and more important, but people didn't have the tools.
QC2.
We had the tools that could fill that gap, and I had the students who needed to learn how to use those tools.
For 4 years, the Quality Control Lab at the University of Southern Maine has paired science with suds.
Then there was no turning back. Now I'm a yeast biologist.
Students working with small breweries across Maine, New England, and even Texas.
As much as we can, the students are running the testing services, they're doing research with brewers.
Bridging the gap between biology and chemistry for the sake of a single sip.
And the students take it very seriously too when they're doing their research. So it's all business when we're in here, but we have been known to visit some of the local tasting rooms for sure.
Whether it's out of a tap, can, or bottle, consistent quality could make all the difference.
Someone has a bad experience with your beer.
There you go.
They have a lot of options now.
White, Saison, Interlude, St. Klippenstein.
At Allagash Brewing Company,
Yeah, so our lab does a lot.
they have an entire team devoted to it.
Quality has been a focus of Rob since day one opening the brewery.
These scientists testing for contaminants, alcohol levels, and carbonation.
These are fresh off the line today, so we're starting around 173. We'll be up to about 2.5.
Even growing and experimenting with their own yeast.
This will be enough for about 40 batches of beer, just in this little vial.
As Maine's beer scene continues to grow,
We're starting to see more lagers coming in now as styles are starting to change a bit.
quality will remain the key.
Have a healthy respect for the brewers and the scientists who make sure that your favorite beer stays your favorite beer and doesn't gradually morph into some different abomination over time.
So the secret's out. Maine's beer industry is thriving and expected to grow for years to come. Thank you for joining us for this special presentation of Maine on Tap. I'm Jana Barnello. Cheers.